All right, so we're going to turn our attention now to three key components that are part of retaining information in the brain itself or in memory. The first one is the amygdala, which and emotions and memory. And this is one of those areas actually that is really quite interesting because of the controversy that has arisen around what's referred to as false memories and the intrusion, or the not the intrusion, but the insertion of memories themselves. And the key to remember is that the amygdala is a key component of the limbic system, but it is also part of the memory retention system as well, or the memory. One of these days I'll get the hang of talking and writing at the same time. So the limbic system and also the memory consolidation system, if you want to put it that way, partly because emotional output increases the importance or decreases the importance of memory that you're actually processing. The greater the emotional output, the more likely it is that you will remember something. So the naturally stimulating hormones that we produce when we're excited or stressed make more glucose energy available to fuel the brain activity. And so when an emotional event occurs, okay, let's do it this way. An emotional event occurs, and when it does, then the limbic system is packing out a variety of hormones, serotonin being one of them, or neurotransmitters I should say, serotonin being one of them, which signals the brain actually that something important is being processed or happening. And so what it does is it makes the receptor sites that much more efficient. Receptors more efficient. And then what that means then is that the memories are processed that much more efficiently, and essentially memory pathways and circuits are made, and that's how we tend to remember things, is these pathways are made as a result of this emotional event. And so the amygdala is actually two emotion processing clusters in the brain's limbic system. And so going down to our diagram down here, let me just point out a couple of things. We had mentioned the basal ganglia, which is pointed out here, and that has to do with movement and procedural memory, like I mentioned to you as well, like tying your shoe and things like that. Procedural memory. And the frontal lobes, we already mentioned, also has an impact when it comes to not only visual input, but also verbal input and remembering things. So the frontal lobes are involved with that. The hippocampus is this general memory processing unit. We mentioned the cerebellum, which is also related to movement. But here, right here in the dead center, is the amygdala, and that area of the brain is critical in arousing brain areas that process emotion. So the amygdala itself increases arousal, and then as it increases arousal, then of course you're going to process at a far greater speed, and efficiency, which is key. Just greater speed isn't enough. you have to have some efficiency as well. In other words, you make the most of the time that you have. Interestingly enough, we were driving back from Ohio to the airport in Detroit this morning, and as we were driving, the highway was not filled, but we saw two different sightings of deer, and I was driving, and so my eyes were really far ahead on the horizon and saw a deer cross a highway, and I saw this car, and whoever it was in the car saw the deer as well and attempted to miss it, and did successfully, but pulled off the road to the left into the median of the highway, then overcompensated and came back across the highway and ended up on the entirely other side of the highway on the other shoulder, even farther in a swampy kind of area. And that's a good example of increased arousal for me. I was paying attention, and because of that emotional input as I was watching this thing unfold, thinking what I could do or what I might need to do to help this person, I can report it to you in a fair amount of detail. Now, it will erode over time, but because of the emotional arousal, that would be a good example of the limbic system being a key component to memory and memory processing. Now, another one that most everybody has is something that we refer to as flashbulb memories. And a classic example of this, which all of you probably remember from very young, is the tragedy on 9/11. And that's a classic flashbulb memory because we basically have emotionally triggered hormone changes that impact memory processing. And that would be a good example. It is remarkably clear and detailed of this kind of memory itself. And that is important to remember when we're talking about flashbulb memories. It is a classic example of the role that emotions play in memory processing and memory production itself. So key components, key things to remember in terms of the amygdala, emotions, and memory.